Wanted to make a surprise to wife collect our old photos. I repaired her old laptop and was shocked what I saw there. Here are the main points. My wife, 34, and I, 32. Wendy met via friends 7 years ago, dated for 2 years, and have been married for 5 years, just after I finished law school. For the first 2 years of our marriage, I worked as an associate at my firm, putting in 60 hours a week. That hard work has paid off, and I'm doing well professionally. Wendy was a teacher at a private school before we married, but she resigned to pursue her master's degree in education and is now enrolled in an educational doctorate program while working part-time. This was a bit of a financial burden since I wanted to pay off my college debts as soon as possible, but we made it work. When we first began dating, my wife was using an ancient laptop. It was in a box in a closet, which I discovered. She said that it had crashed and would no longer function. I plugged it in and attempted to turn it on. Nothing. Wendy took photographs of everything when we first met, especially selfies of herself with others. I ripped out the hard drive and went through it, knowing she had some images of us from that period. It seemed to be okay. The issue has to be someplace else. I waited until she went to go see her sister before plugging it into a Sada cable connected to my PC, wanting to surprise her with images from when we first began dating. There were photographs there. There are several photographs. Some pictures were of us on dates, laughing and smiling. They brought back a lot of happy memories. However, there were additional photos of her with other individuals. I recall one individual in particular. Bob was his name, and Wendy had dated him before me. There were several photographs of her and Bob. I wanted to take just our photographs, so I figured the simplest approach would be to categorize them by date, assuming that the most recent images would be of just us. However, when I sorted them by date, several of her photos with Bob were mixed in with photos of us. I started going through the images one by one and discovered that in a number of her pictures with Bob, when they were hugging and kissing, she was wearing a necklace/locket that I had bought her for her birthday the second year we were dating. I had to borrow money from my brother to purchase it. When I looked at the dates on the images, I saw a pattern. On days and weekends when school demanded my complete attention, when she went to her mother's home or her sister's place to offer me peace and quiet, she was meeting up with Bob behind my back. I was enraged. It seemed like though fire ants were gnawing on my head, heart, and intestines. I was about to smash through the barriers when something broke and I felt numb. I started seeing and thinking in very cold, analytical ways. I transferred all of her photos, not just the ones I'd seen, on a flash drive. I packed a suitcase, got some suits, took the thumb drive, and drove across town to stay with my brother. I left her laptop hard drive into my PC, with a photo of her kissing Bob displayed on the monitor. The only reminder I left was a sticky note with an arrow pointing to the necklace/locket. Wendy called me from her mother's home, assuming that's where she was, but I didn't respond. It wasn't until a few hours later, when she likely returned to our apartment and saw the image on the display, that she bombarded my phone with VM and messages. They were all disregarded by me. I've previously discussed separation and divorce with another associate in the family law section. We don't have any children or real estate since most of our money was spent on repaying my student debts and paying for her schooling. My company has wrapped the wagons around me, so her calls are routed to VM. She is not permitted on the property. Security already turned her away. Wendy found me at my brother's home, but he told her over the phone that if she came over, he'd put his Dobermans on her. He said she was yelling, weeping, and pleading over the phone. It did not make me sad or pleased in any way. I didn't feel anything. My marriage has ended. That's something I've accepted. But it's been 2 days, and I'm still not feeling anything. There is no discomfort. There is no rage. Nothing. How is it possible that I no longer have emotions for her, that I have no want to see her again, that I have no desire to reconcile? Feeling nothing for her now that I'm alone with my thoughts frightens me. Is this something that will last? Is it possible that I'm still in shock? Is it permanent that I'm broken? On the plus side, I've never seen clearer answers in my instances. First and foremost, I'd want to thank everyone for their responses. I'm amazed by the nice reactions and want to thank everyone who has shared their numbness with me. It's comforting to know that this is a typical reaction. In the near future, I'll look into individual therapy. The employee at my firm who was managing my case, let's call her Gail, went through the other photos on the flash drive and discovered many where Wendy is cuddling/kissing Bob, and the engagement ring I gave her is clearly visible. When I was informed this, I didn't feel any grief or resentment. Instead, I felt elated. I grin. Surprisingly, I questioned Gail why this terrible news made me so joyful. She claims it's because it vindicates every action I've made since leaving. I've been NC with Wendy, and all communications have gone via Gail, with the exception of her relatives and friends, who incorrectly believe my brother and his wife would be sympathetic ears. They aren't. Gail has already created a separation agreement and has a meeting with Wendy arranged for Thursday afternoon. Gail informed Wendy that if she is not represented by counsel, I would not attend. Gail deserves a special mention. I can't give her a solid moniker, but if you imagine Pit Viper, you get the picture. I'm thankful she's on my side. We'll be submitting the divorce petition soon. Gail feels that any spousal assistance will be low and short-lived, i.e., she expects I'll be stuck paying the rent for the next 5 months until our lease expires and Wendy finishes the remainder of her PhD classes. Our sole big asset is a savings account for a down payment on a home, but it's a dual signature account with no ATM access. Thank you, long-forgotten bank person, for proposing it as an extra security step against fraud. When Wendy was meant to be at her part-time work, my SIL went over to my place to get more of my clothing and personal stuff. She ended up listening to Wendy for many hours. Wendy would lie about almost anything, according to the Redditor who stated so. Wendy was repeating one readily proven lie after another as SIL was packing away my belongings. Wendy, frustrated by the lack of progress, questioned SIL. Isn't there a man in your history that simply gets into? She was just so sorry. I wanted to yell at her, but instead I'd plead for comfort and reassurance, pretending to be a wounded animal. We also had a lot of makeup, which is the one thing I feel somewhat bad about, and she made sure to be especially daring for my sake. So when I asked if I could snap some photographs, she said yes. During this period, I had become estranged from our shared friends, declining invitations and saying things like Jane wouldn't want me to go, or asking a few one-on-one for advice on how to manage it when their spouse becomes angry. Is your spouse prone to breaking things or slapping you? Jane would never do anything like that. I was simply curious. Then, just before we were supposed to move into the new house, I got cold feet. I told her I didn't think I'd be able to accomplish it, that I just did not trust her. She was in a panic, asking with me not to go again and imploring for whatever she could do to make things right. So I informed her that I thought our social group had put her up to it. She vowed on her life that no one knew, but I questioned how I could trust her. I don't trust her with them since she lied to me twice before. A new beginning often involves new individuals in our life. That I'd never feel safe again as long as these folks I'm not sure I can trust were around. I worked her down to the point where she agreed to ghost them all. That, though, was insufficient for me. I informed her that I needed to destroy the bridge because I didn't trust them. So I had her rejoin and write a message to the group chat about false pals and backstabbers and how she was better off without them, then ban them all. She sobbed for a long time over it, but if it was necessary for me to remain, she'd get over it. I got a number of messages from common friends wondering what the hell was going on, to which I replied that it was complex and that I'd speak to them soon. After a few more days, it's time to relocate to the new location. We spend the day moving things in, and Jane is virtually delirious with excitement when we speak about our future plans. I tell her to go collect anything she needs from her mother's house, and I'll go get some things from my parents' house, and we'll meet back at the apartment that night. As soon as she goes, I contact my buddy, and we pack everything I brought over and return it to his apartment. Then I message my friends, telling them Jane had been violent for the previous several months, a lie, which is why I hadn't gone out, and that she had blocked them because she believed I told them, and they were pushing me to leave her. I then went to the bank and depleted our joint account, which included around $400 from me and approximately $3,700 and some change from her. Then I wrote an email to Jane's mother claiming to be an enraged ex who had access to my phone, which had all of the sensual images I had taken with Jane. I just thought you should be aware of what your daughter and that piece of trash are up to. Finally, I had a buddy strike me in the eye twice, causing it to swell. Then I blocked Jane and requested 2 of our common friends to meet up with me. It was over in an instant. I explained how Jane had been psychologically and physically aggressive in the months after I uncovered her cheating. I gave them screenshots of her conversations with this person. I told them I had remained silent to protect the peace, and how she had lashed out at them all when she felt they were assisting me behind her back. How out of character that was. When she threw a remote at me and swole in my eye while we were moving, I realized I had to go, and that's why I needed to take the money to get to safety. Jane arrived up to my friend's home seeking for me, and he told her I had moved, and that if she showed up again, he would call the authorities while I hid upstairs. Heard how she frantically tried to find me to figure out what was going on, and how she reached out to our mutual friends to make amends and tell them it was all my idea, only to discover that the ones I had been talking to and subtly alluding to being abused for weeks, as well as the ones who remembered me coming to them after the first time she cheated, call it professional empathy. I've been in his shoes. You know you've got a poor case with a loser client when the opposing lawyer is 1982-1986 Wayne Gretzky, and you're a second-string high school goaltender with a sluggish glove hand. Essentially, you simply want the pounding to stop. After the meeting, I departed without saying anything to Wendy. What's the point? Everything she says is going to be a lie. Yesterday afternoon, Gail got the signed separation agreement. I expected to be responsible for the rent until June, if only to preserve my own credit. But instead we're going to share the house down payment savings account evenly. This was the carrot to get Wendy to sign the separation agreement so soon. Wendy will pay her own rent, as well as all utilities, beginning this month. She'll have a little money left over after covering her housing and education expenses, enough to move to a new place. Wendy seems to believe this is a win for her, but it is a tactical move that destroys the one big asset we have. Divorce will be a lot easy today. Gail is drafting an uncontested divorce petition, so we won't even have to go to court. The best part is, it turns out that although we were in our 5th year of marriage, we hadn't really been married for 5 years, 4.5 years and 7 months. In our state, if a marriage has lasted fewer than 5 years, the family court will usually pursue rescission, a concept borrowed from contract law. This indicates that the court will return the parties to their pre-agreement financial situation, or in our instance, pre-marriage financial situation. I was an unemployed, deeply indebted law school graduate waiting for my bar results at the time of our marriage, while Wendy was a full-time, game-ready teacher. Wendy can't argue that rescission isn't appropriate in her situation since she has no real property, no children, a bank account full of money, a teaching certificate, a graduate degree in hand, and a PhD degree on the way. In a nutshell, no alimony. Gail did tell Todd that if Wendy filed for divorce, the first person she'd depose would be Bob. Wendy agreed not to dispute the divorce, Todd said. If everything goes as planned, I'll be putting this tragic chapter of my life behind me in 3 months. I still have no feelings for Wendy, but it no longer bothers me. The person who claimed it was because Wendy I dated/married didn't exist was correct. You, sir, are intelligent. Wendy, the woman I dated, fell in love with, and married, did not exist. The guy who cheated on me and lied to me is an unknown to me. Our whole relationship was a ruse, an intricate Plan B deception that benefited her at the cost of my. I believe my perspective is partly influenced by my first real job between college and law school, which was in commission sales. There was a saying that stuck with us: it takes a lot of no's to get one yes. So don't worry about the no's, don't spend your time and effort on them, and you'll find your yeses a lot quicker and easier. Wendy was a no, and I'd already squandered too much time and effort on her, so no more. Friends, relatives, and colleagues have noticed that my smile has returned. And to be honest, I am feeling better than I have in years. But, just to be cautious, I've arranged a couple phone/video sessions with a therapist. We'll see how things proceed. This will most likely be my last update. Thank you all again for your help and advice. If I may return your wonderful advice with some of my own. If your spouse cheats on you, consult the lawyer as soon as possible, and then listen to what your lawyer advises you to do.